Mary Holm, personal finance expert, is in the studio with us. Hi, Mary.
Hi, Jesse.
Nice to see you.
Thanks, you too.
I've
just battled in through an hour of rain. It took me an hour to get here, and it was raining heavily the whole way. I kept thinking, oh, it'll ease up,
Gosh.
But it was like getting a free car wash all the way here. It's very heavy rain, and that's just in Auckland, which is nothing compared with.
Well, I was looking at the rain radar. You can see this here. That's most of the North Island, at least the western part of the North Island, which is covered in blue at the moment. The East Coast will be wondering what we're talking about. But anyway.
I've never seen the rain radar look like that before.
Yeah, me neither, actually. I was looking at the... we can have a look at the rain radar together off here.
Yes.
It's not the most exciting radio, is it?
No.
Jesse and Mary talk about the rain radar. Well, look, you're going to give us a bit of a history lesson today, because I think you're going to go back and talk about some KiwiSaver changes.
Yes, I noticed, around the time of the budget and all, quite radical changes to KiwiSaver, and it made me just start thinking about how it's changed since it started. And then I noticed a sort of pattern coming through, that the changes that have tended to make KiwiSaver less attractive to ordinary people have all happened under national-led governments. And the ones that have tended to improve KiwiSaver have tended to happen under Labour-led governments. And I thought, gosh, I hadn't realised that before, and I think it's kind of interesting. So KiwiSaver started in July 2007. Well, it was Michael Cullen's baby, as you might remember. And back then there was a $1,000 kickstart when you joined, and that lasted a few years.
For everyone of all ages.
Yes, that's under 65. Yes.
Sorry, yes.
Yeah. And there was a government fee subsidy. That was just $40 a year. But, that all helped. That only lasted until 2009. Government contributions at that point were matching your money. If you put in $1,042 a year, the government put in $1,042 a year. And so that was, reasonably generous. It was called a member tax credit at that point, but basically that's the name's changed, but basically it's the same thing. Employer contributions started at 1%, and then what Labour proposed was that they'd increase to 2% the next year, 3% the year after that, and 4% the year after that. So that was what we started with. And then came a new government in 2008, the Key government, and so under them, the employer contributions were at 1%, and then they did go up to 2% as planned, but there was a delay until they came to 3%. It wasn't as quickly as previously planned, and they cancelled the move to 4%. So from the point of view of employers, that was actually perhaps welcome, but I'm talking here from the point of view of you and me and ordinary New Zealanders out there. That was quite disappointing that those employer contributions were reduced. And then looking at total remuneration, which we talked about quite a few times before, about how employees basically put in their own contribution, their own employer contribution as well as their own employee contribution. And that was allowed at the beginning under Labour, but then Labour stopped it. But then in 2008, National brought it back in again with some restrictions on it, but still the Retirement Commission, which is Te Ara Honga Ora, says 25% of employers always use total remuneration and 20% more do to some extent. So it's pretty widespread out there.
Yeah.
And I gather that it tends to be the bigger employers too. So we've got this total remuneration thing, which is, I think, against the sort of basic spirit of KiwiSaver. It's not...
As you say, we've talked about it before, and it can be a bit complicated. But basically, your employer says, "Hey, look, I'm paying you so much that we won't do the KiwiSaver thing.
Yeah.
It's recognised in your salary."
That's what they say, and the practical outcome of that is that your it all comes out of your pay packet.
Yeah.
And they justify it by saying we want our employees who are in and out of KiwiSaver to be treated the same.
Yeah.
But I maintain that the part of the point of KiwiSaver is
There should be an incentive to do
yes,
it. Yeah.
to make it more attractive. So that's total remuneration.
Yeah.
And then we had in 2012 under a national-led government. The employer contribution started to be taxed. Before that, it wasn't. And so the employer contribution was the same number of dollars as the employee contribution. Then they started taxing it. So the government got some of its money back again. And then the government contribution halved in 2012. And then in 2015, the $1,000 kickstart was removed. And at the end of the KiwiSaver Home grant in 2024, they were all under national-led governments, and they were quite big sort of cuts in what made KiwiSaver so attractive. I mean, I suppose with the $1,000 kickstart, by then, the majority of people of the right age group were in KiwiSaver anyway, but I always liked having it there to just entice in the people, because I suspect those who aren't in it tend to be lower income people and worse off people in general. So that was a real pity. And the end of the KiwiSaver First Home Grant, which was up to $5,000 or $10,000 on a new build, so that was a real pity. And then looking at the good changes before this year, in 2018, these are under Labour-led government. Now, they don't tend to be major things, but they're all good things. In 2018, annual statements were required so that everyone in KiwiSaver round about this time of the year actually gets a statement from their KiwiSaver provider telling them various information about how well they've done. And in 2020, that was improved so that now everybody gets an estimate of how much they're likely to have at 65 and how many dollars per week that'll likely be in retirement. And I think those are really good changes because they give people a realistic idea of where they're heading. Yeah. And then there were a few other changes that aren't as significant, but one that is very significant to some people. 2021 people with life-shortening congenital conditions were allowed to withdraw KiwiSaver before 65, which would be a big deal for them. And in 2021, default funds were changed from conservative to balanced, and I think that was overall a good move because it got people who hadn't got round to doing anything about the fund they'd been plonked into when they joined, were now in a balanced fund, which is more likely to grow faster. In the meantime, fees have tended to get lower and there's been more responsible and ethical investment options. But those have been good developments in KiwiSaver, but they're not thanks to any government. They're thanks to the industry, really. Yeah. And then along comes the 2025 budget, and I won't go into this in detail, but the government contribution's been halved again. So it started at $1,042 and now it's down to just $261 for every dollar you put in. Up to $1,042 you get 25 cents now. There was a good change in getting 16 and 17-year-olds, giving them more breaks in KiwiSaver, getting the government contribution, etc., and employer contributions from next April. Employee contributions have increased under the budget changes, but that's not something the government's doing. That's something they're pushing ordinary people to do, rising from 3.5% to 3.5% and then 4%.
Yeah. It was quite an interesting sell at the time, wasn't it? It was like, hey, your KiwiSaver balance is going to grow faster under these changes.
Yes.
Because you will be putting
You'll
more money in.
be putting more money. And that's right. And your employer will be putting more money in. But, and so that's a plus if the employer's going to be putting more money in. But the government acknowledged that employers are most of them will probably just not give people such big pay rises to make up for the fact that they have to put more into KiwiSaver. So that was even acknowledged by the government. And self-employed people and non-employees were just sort of straight losers in the 2025 budget. So when the Retirement Commission had a look at these 2025 changes, I thought there were a couple of interesting conclusions. they said the changes should increase retirement savings for 80% of contributing members. So people will end up with more money because they and their employer are putting in more. But that was for 80%. But the other 20% who won't do well out of the changes, and this is an interesting list. They include low-income earners, self-employed, many women, Maori and Pacific people. So people that I would have thought we really want to encourage to get decent retirement savings built up aren't going to benefit as much as the rest of society from these changes in the budget. So it's Jane Wrights, and the Retirement Commissioner, said she would have liked to see some of the government savings go to that group of people, and I totally agree with that. So there we are. What I don't want people to do is not bother with KiwiSaver because of all of this. I mean, it all sounds a bit discouraging. What I do want to see is a national-led government do something really good for KiwiSaver next opportunity, please. Your turn to do something that makes the scheme more positive for people. But look, there's about a third of the people in KiwiSaver are not contributing now, and that's a real pity. The fact is that it is still a good deal for everybody. Even self-employed people and non-employees, they're still getting 25 cents for every dollar they put in, up to 1,042, and that still means that, for example, instead of retiring with 100,000, they'll retire with 125,000, and that's a big difference. So it's not. I was listening to Radio on Nights a couple of nights ago. Someone was almost saying how they were proud of the fact they hadn't bothered with KiwiSaver, and I thought, that's a pity.
Yeah.
You don't really realise you're missing out on getting some free money from the government, and in many cases from your employer. So,
can I observe, Mary, perhaps on behalf of listeners who are keener on the National Party than the Labour Party, that they might like to make the point that the National Party made these changes because they traditionally spend less in government. They're looking for ways to spend less, and maybe in the 2025 changes they were forced to spend less because of sort of the mismanagement of the government for them.
Yes, and that's totally fair.
It's a perspective, anyway.
Yeah, and I was thinking of making that point, actually, that the government has saved government some money, and that in itself is not a bad thing.
And perhaps emphasise the personal responsibility of people to save themselves rather than being paternalistically encouraged by the government.
Yeah, no, that's all totally fair enough. I agree.
But you're just looking through at the framework of KiwiSaver, what's helped and what's hindered it.
Yes, from the perspective of the ordinary person. And I think, we could all agree and disagree about what other ways government money is being spent.
Yeah.
No one's ever going to think all the government spending is good and etc. But I just think it's a pity, and I think it's a pity that it's sending messages to people that KiwiSaver's not all that good and doesn't matter all that much, because I think it probably does. Yeah.
Did you want to spend some time talking about an aspect of last week's or an earlier conversation we had?
Yes. It was got an interesting email. Yeah. It was actually two segments ago where we did that financial quiz, remember? And back on June the 5th. And a listener sent in an email that made an awfully good point, and it made me feel a bit silly, actually. He was talking about question 6 in the quiz, which was, how long does it take for a $1,000 debt, which with an interest rate of 20% to double? And I should have remembered a rule that I've talked to you about many times before, rule of 72. We've had that on this segment before. And I just don't know why. I was busy thinking about other things that day. Because the point is that with the rule of 72, you have a look at how long, well, for one thing, it tells you how long it takes for money to double. And that was the question, how long does it take for a $1,000 debt to double? And what you do is you look at the interest rate on the debt and it was 20%. So you divide 20 into 72. For some reason, the 72 number, you've got to keep remembering, it's kind of a magic number in this context. So 20 into 72 is about 3.5, just over 3.5.
Yeah.
And so the answer is just over 3.5 years. There's probably some easier examples where...
Yeah, 6% would be 12 years.
Yes.
24% would be 3 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, whatever.
That's right. Yeah. Whatever the interest rate is. And so, yes, if you have a credit card debt that's at 20%, and it's $1,000, it's going to double in just over 3 years, or 3.5 years.
Okay.
And you can also take the rule round the other way and say, if I'm earning 3% on a return on something, and it doubles in, you're going 3 into 72. I'm trying to,
Yeah, 3 into 72 is 24.
Yes.
So it'd take 24 years to double.
Yeah, but if it's doubled, that's right, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. If you've got an investment or a debt that works either on investments or debts, if it has doubled, you know it's doubled, and you're thinking it's doubled in 6 years.
Yeah.
What sort of return have I made on that? You go 6s into 72 goes 12.
Love it.
So I've earned a 12% return, which is pretty nice.
Great.
Yes.
I'm not sure if I'll ever have that one at my beck and call. I'll have to look it up each time, but maybe I can at least remember 72.
Yes.
Thank you, Mary. Great session.
Pleasure. Thanks.
Mary Holm, our personal finance expert.